Ah, the Sega Genesis, or Mega Drive. What fond memories I have seeing mine for the first time under the Christmas tree, one morning in the early 90s. From its blast processing with the Sega Virtua processor, to its beautifully unique synthesized audio thanks to the Yamaha YM2612 chip, the 16-bit Sega Genesis was a beast of a machine to behold, and one that kept me entertained for hours upon hours as a kid, and even still to this day. Though the platform had a lot of well-known, classic, and diverse titles, such as Sonic the Hedgehog, Streets of Rage, Golden Axe, and NBA Jam, there were over 700 games released for the system, and many that would either go unplayed by the majority of gamers over the years, or be lost and forgotten with time. The Genesis has recently been one of my go-to platforms for emulation and retro gaming, and I am constantly discovering games I had never heard of before. So allow me to share 10 of my personal choices for the Sega Genesis that I think are either obscure, underrated, or at the very least not talked about much today, and hopefully you will discover a couple of hidden gems. I have seen some other similar videos on YouTube, and I'm going to do my best to avoid repeating a lot of games mentioned in those, as well as ones that appear on the Sega Genesis Mini console and the Mini 2, which may be released by the time you are watching this, as including games from these would basically defeat the purpose of this video. I have also tried to pull from a variety of different genres. At the end of the day, I just want to give out some good recommendations you may not be aware of. So let's take it back about 30 years. This is my top 10 obscure or underrated Sega Genesis gems. Number 10. Final Zone. We kick this list off with a little-known isometric shooter that was released fairly early in the Genesis lifespan. Final Zone, aka FZ Senki Access in Japan, has an addicting and unique gameplay loop, though it is somewhat reminiscent of the Desert Jungle Urban Strike series that also appeared on the Genesis. This game is fairly under the radar, and I don't think it has been re-released for any collections or virtual stores, and I myself only discovered it more recently. Your goal is to outfit a futuristic mech fighter with up to 14 out of 20 total weapon types that you collect in order to clear out a level of all the enemy units and then fight a boss. As you gather more weapons, you can strategize how to set them up on your mech and when to use them in order to yield the best results. It is a fairly simple concept, but it all comes together nicely to create a great game that offers a variety of different levels and bosses, and is super easy to just pick up and play at any time. It's lower on the list because it's a bit too short and the bosses aren't as prevalent in the second half. A 2-player co-op mode would have also been nice. Still, I think this one will appeal to a lot of gamers out there, and I am saying this with zero nostalgia influencing my opinion. Check it out. Number 9. The Humans. Now this is a bizarre game here, and I will say right away that it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Give this one a chance though. After getting the controls down, some people will find an addicting and rewarding challenge in The Humans, especially if you are fond of games like Lemmings. The gameplay style would definitely be classified as a strategy, platformer, puzzle hybrid, and the basic premise of the game is to traverse numerous levels with your tribe members. Each level has different challenges that might require building ladders or utilizing various tools in order to access certain locations and save other tribe members. Even though it started development on the Atari Lynx and was ported to many different platforms, the Genesis version holds up well enough in my opinion. I feel that the unique gameplay style and endless amount of challenging levels is enough to warrant a spot on this list. If you like puzzle or strategy games and thinking outside of the box in order to problem solve, give this one a try. Number 8. Growl. Oh yeah, now we are talking. Growl, known as Runark in Japan, is a beat-em-up that was originally released in the arcades by Taito in 1990, but was soon ported to the Genesis in '91. This game is simply outrageous. You control what I can only guess is some kind of forest ranger or game warden who sets out to save the local wildlife from dangerous poachers who are threatening their extinction. Throughout the game, different animals will even aid you in destroying the bad guys. I must say, that is awesome. The controls feel great, and all of the different combat moves and power-ups are rewarding. I also really like that you can choose from 4 different characters, all of which have different stats and playstyles. I put this lower on the list since it unfortunately doesn't have a 2-player mode, and it is also pretty short. If you like arcade beat-em-ups, definitely give this one a try though. And next time someone brings up Golden Axe or Streets of Rage, ask them if they have ever played Growl. Number 7. Wings of War. The Genesis had an amazingly deep library of good shoot-em-up games, such as Musha, Thunder Force, Twin Cobra, and Soul Deist, just to name a few. Wings of War, aka Gynoug outside of the US, is another one that deserves to be mentioned when discussing some of the best shmups on the system, even though it wasn't widely known. In this game you control the Angel War, or Gynoug, who must defend the heavens against an onslaught of demons. It doesn't necessarily bring anything new to the genre, but it has some superb looking bosses and refreshing environments that aren't your typical space backgrounds. The level currently being shown is called Body Manufacturing Factory. Just look at how beautifully grotesque these graphics are. It's like a cross between Clive Barker and H.R. Giger. I do wish it was a bit longer though, or had a co-op mode, but at least there are multiple difficulties to progress through, and you certainly won't get tired of the music. Number 6. Devilish, the Next Possession. Did you ever wonder what Breakout or Arkanoid would be like if it was remade as an action dungeon crawler with bosses? Well, look no further because the Devilish series is exactly this. You take control of a unique dual paddle system that allows you to precisely maneuver a ball through various terrain and dungeons without dropping it. You are able to move the top paddle up and down as well as side to side, and you can even swap between different formations when you need to bounce the ball horizontally. Scattered throughout the game you will find power-ups to assist you and many types of enemies and obstacles that will attempt to slow you down. At the end of each level, there is some sort of boss or event that you must complete in order to progress to the next area. Not only do you have to navigate through the level without losing too many of the balls, but you must do so in a timely manner, since you are also racing against the clock. Overall, it is a great experience and a wonderful twist on a classic game formula. There is also a 2-player mode and time trial challenges which really help the replayability. Number 5. Soldiers of Fortune, aka the Chaos Engine. Here we have a top-down run-and-gun shooter with a Victorian steampunk setting that was released in early 1993 for a multitude of different consoles and home computers. Despite it being fairly popular and winning some awards upon its release, I don't hear much about the Sega Genesis version anymore. The 2-player co-op mode is an absolute blast even still to this day, and it is the main reason I included this title on the list. In my opinion, Soldiers of Fortune should be mentioned alongside the other Genesis cooperative greats, such as ToeJam and Earl, Streets of Rage, Golden Axe, and Gunstar Heroes. Having 6 different mercenaries to choose from, all with completely different stats, weapons, and special abilities, is a real treat. You can use the money that you collect from the battlefield to upgrade these stats and even buy extra lives if you want, which adds more layers of strategy and replayability. The levels are well designed with endless amounts of secrets and hidden areas that contain power-ups and money to reward the adventurous. If you are looking for a new cooperative game to try out, I would highly recommend Soldiers of Fortune. Number 4. Fatal Labyrinth. Oh yes, now this is one of my all-time favorites. Even though it's somewhat known nowadays, I still feel that it is underrated and more obscure than it should be. Fatal Labyrinth is one of the very few games that appeared on consoles back in the day that could actually be considered a true roguelike. By that, I mean a randomly generated dungeon crawler that uses turn-based gameplay, grid-based movement, and permadeath. In Fatal Labyrinth, you control a hero that enters a forbidden 30-floor labyrinthian dungeon in order to level up and reclaim a holy goblet stolen by an evil dragon. Pretty generic stuff when it comes to a fantasy story, but the real draw here is the gameplay and huge amount of variety. No two runs through the dungeon are ever the same, therefore you really have to rely on your skill and utilize everything you can find, rather than simply memorizing level layouts like you do in so many other games. There is a good variety of weapons, armor, and magic to find, randomly scattered throughout the levels, and you will definitely need it. Reaching the final floor is no easy task, and the game hasn't necessarily aged perfectly, but overall it's a refreshing RPG experience that laid the foundation for so many popular titles today. Fatal Labyrinth isn't for everyone, but those who are into this style of game will likely enjoy it immensely. Number 3. Alien Soldier. Alright, so I'm breaking the rules a bit with this one considering it is included on the Sega Genesis Mini 2 console, and it is somewhat well known nowadays, having been re-released through various modern platforms and mentioned in some other videos. Still, I couldn't see myself making this list without including Alien Soldier. It truly fits the definition of an obscure gem in my eyes, seeing as it was published as late as 1995 after the Sega Saturn was already out, and it was limited strictly to the Sega channel in North America, which not a lot of people had, myself included. It's a shame I was never able to own this game back in the day, because I know I would have loved it, seeing it has been one of my go-to Genesis games recently. Alien Soldier is a beautiful yet very challenging 2D run-and-gun style shooter with 25 varying stages and an emphasis on fast gameplay and epic boss battles. It received critical acclaim during its time and truly pushes the graphical limitations of the Sega Genesis. Each boss is completely different than the last, requiring you to fully understand all of their strengths, weaknesses, and patterns in order to succeed. I love that you can customize your loadout with different weapons and even select a specific type of user interface HUD that is most appealing to you. There is also a pretty good 2-player option available with this game, which is just the cherry on top of an already delicious cake. Number 2. Gaiares. Yep, it's another shoot 'em up. The Genesis just had so many great ones. If you are familiar with R-Type, you probably noticed that this game bears a striking resemblance to it, and that's certainly not a bad thing in my book. In Gaiares, you utilize what is called an auxiliary TOZ system device that seems very similar to the Force in R-Type, except that the system device in Gaiares fires out at an opponent in order for you to inherit its weapon. There are a whopping 18 different weapons in the game, and if you steal multiple times from the same opponent type, you will power up your currently held weapon, causing it to take on different graphic styles depending on its strength. Gaiares has some gorgeous visuals, and makes use of advanced parallax scrolling and multiple warping effects that were quite impressive for the year 1990. It has aged very well overall, but man, it is seriously one of the hardest shoot 'em ups I have ever played, and will require some major skill in order to beat it. Nevertheless, this is a must-play game for anyone who likes classic retro space shooters, especially ones that are tough as nails. Before I get to my number 1 spot, I just want to quickly list a few other games as honorable mentions that didn't quite make it on the list, likely because they were either covered extensively in other similar YouTube videos, included on one of the mini consoles, or because they weren't obscure enough. Crusader of Senti. This game has been talked about a lot recently, and is in many similar lists, so I didn't use it for mine. Definitely check this out though if you haven't seen it. Some people consider this Zelda-like top-down adventure RPG to be the best game on the system. It is also included on the Genesis Mini 2 console. Vector Man. This one is pretty well known and is also on the Genesis Mini console, but it was one of my all-time favorite games as a kid, and honestly still is to this day. I have fond memories of my dad and I playing through it and eventually beating it. It's an action-packed shooter platformer with a very unique aesthetic style to it, a lot of excellent bosses and power-ups, and some killer music. It also has a worthy sequel, Vector Man 2, on the Genesis Mini too. Mutant League Football and Mutant League Hockey. These wacky EA Sports games are too well known for my list, considering they even spawned a television series at one time, but I felt obligated to at least mention them in a video about obscure Genesis games, considering how wild and off the wall they are. Both are a lot of fun with crazy teams and power-ups, and make for some great multiplayer action. Number 1. Buck Rogers' Countdown to Doomsday. This might seem like a bit of an odd choice for the number 1 pick to some of you, and even I would have probably thought the same thing a couple of years back. However, after discovering the game and experiencing it firsthand, it was honestly the number 1 factor for creating this list in the first place. I wanted to spread the word about this great Genesis RPG that seemed criminally underappreciated and too often slept on. Buck Rogers is a turn-based tactical role-playing game that was first released for the Amiga, Commodore 64, and MS-DOS in 1990, and then ported to the Genesis in 91. Even though I am a huge RPG and science fiction fan, the Buck Rogers universe is something that I honestly never had much exposure to, and this is likely the reason that the game wasn't on my radar. It takes place in the 25th century, when humanity has terraformed and colonized other planets. The party you control works for Neo, the New Earth organization, which is in the midst of a war against RAM, a corrupt corporation that plans to destroy Earth with a Doomsday laser in order to tighten its control on the other planets in the galaxy. Buck Rogers features a total of 3 races and 4 classes, from which you create your party of 6 different characters, all with varying stats and specialty skills, similar to how you might begin other CRPGs or Dungeons & Dragons games. Throughout the mostly open-ended adventure, you will battle both on foot and in space, while you complete various quests, including many optional ones, and level up your party in order to save Earth from its imminent doom. It truly feels like a predecessor to games such as Mass Effect, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, and System Shock, and its influence on titles like this definitely shows. The large freedom of choice and delicately crafted science fiction universe makes Buck Rogers' Countdown to Doomsday one of my favorite Genesis games, and one that I hope more people get to experience. And there we have it! Hopefully some of you have discovered some new games to check out. I know I'm leaving out lots of amazing titles, so please leave your lesser known or underrated Genesis recommendations in the comments. I may end up doing a part 2 of this, or possibly one for a different console such as the Sega Saturn or TurboGrafx-16. If you are interested in playing any of these games, but you don't currently have a functioning Sega Genesis, check out the link to my RetroArch startup guide at the end of this video to get yourself set up. If you want to see more retro gaming content in the future, be sure and subscribe to this channel, and I will also be streaming on Twitch at twitch.tv/Watsonator. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.